My husband wanted to see his ex every weekend, so I booked a flight and left him behind. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Some patterns aren't meant to be repeated. And sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to walk away. The first red flag wasn't the late-night phone calls. It wasn't even the way David's eyes lit up whenever her name appeared on his screen. No. The first real red flag was when my husband of 8 months looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sarah thinks we should all have dinner together. To clear the air." I should have laughed. I should have walked out right then. Instead, I found myself asking, "Sarah? Your ex-wife? Sarah?" "She's not just my ex-wife," David said, his voice taking on that patient tone he used when explaining things to particularly slow clients at his law firm. "She's the mother of my children. She's going to be in our lives forever, Emma. We need to find a way to make this work." Our lives. As if Sarah belonged in the same sentence as us. That conversation happened on a Tuesday night in our kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd imagined cooking Sunday dinners for his kids when they visited. The same kitchen where I'd pictured birthday cakes and homework sessions and all the beautiful, messy moments that come with blended families. I was 28, naive enough to believe that love could conquer logistics, and optimistic enough to think that being a stepmother would be my greatest adventure. David was 38, recently divorced, and carrying baggage I couldn't even see yet. Baggage that would eventually crush everything we'd built together. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Chapter 1. The Perfect Setup. Let me paint you a picture of how this all began, because every disaster starts with what looks like a perfect setup. I met David on a rainy Thursday at a bookstore cafe in downtown Seattle. I was there grading papers. I taught 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary, and he was there reviewing case files. We both reached for the same chocolate croissant. Our hands touched, and he gave me this sheepish smile that made my stomach flip. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling his hand back. "Please, take it." "We could split it," I suggested. Surprised by my own boldness, he laughed. A rich, warm sound that I'd later learn meant he was genuinely pleased rather than just being polite. "I'm David." "Emma?" And that was it. That was the moment I fell for a man who would systematically dismantle my self-worth over the course of 2 years. But in the beginning, David was perfect. He was successful, established, and serious about commitment in a way the guys my age weren't. He'd been married before, yes, but he spoke about his divorce with the kind of mature acceptance that made me feel sophisticated just for listening. "Sarah and I grew apart," he'd explained on our 3rd date, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "We wanted different things. She's a good person, don't get me wrong. We brought out the worst in each other toward the end." I nodded knowingly, as if I understood the complexities of a failing marriage. At 26, my longest relationship had lasted 18 months and ended because my boyfriend thought couples' Halloween costumes were too committed. "The hardest part is the kids," David continued. "Jake is 8, and Lily is 5. They're incredible, Emma. They're my whole world." The way his face softened when he talked about his children should have been my first clue. Not that loving your kids is a red flag, of course it isn't. But the way David talked about them, like they existed in this sacred space that no one else could ever truly enter, that should have told me something about where I'd always stand in his priorities. "I'd love to meet them," I said, meaning it completely. "Soon," he promised. "I want to make sure this is serious first. I don't introduce them to just anyone." This is serious, I thought, my heart doing little somersaults. He's thinking long-term. Chapter 2. Meeting the Ex-Wife. Sarah was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured someone bitter, maybe a little frumpy, the kind of ex-wife who makes current wives feel smugly superior. Instead, Sarah was luminous. That's the only word for it. She had this honey blonde hair that caught the light perfectly, blue eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and the kind of effortless style that suggested she'd rolled out of bed looking like a magazine cover. More than that, though, Sarah was nice, genuinely, infuriatingly nice. "Emma!" she exclaimed when David introduced us at Jake's soccer game, pulling me into a hug like we were old friends. "I've heard so much about you. David says you're a teacher? That's wonderful. Jake's been having some trouble with reading comprehension. Maybe you could give me some tips?" I found myself actually enjoying our conversation. She asked thoughtful questions about my job, complimented my shoes, and shared a funny story about Lily's recent obsession with unicorns. When Jake scored a goal, she cheered just as loudly as David did, and when Lily ran over for a hug, Sarah scooped her up without getting grass stains on her pristine white jeans. "She's great," I told David on the drive home. "Really great." "Yeah," he said, but there was something in his voice I couldn't quite place. "She is." Looking back, I think that was the moment I should have paid attention to, not Sarah's perfection, but David's tone when he acknowledged it. There was pride there, and affection, and something else I was too trusting to recognize, as longing. Chapter 3. The Blending Process. For the first year of our relationship, everything seemed to fall into place beautifully. David's kids accepted me with the kind of easy adaptability that children have when the adults around them are happy. Jake started coming to me for help with his homework, and Lily began insisting that I braid her hair before school on the mornings they stayed with us. Sarah and I developed what I thought was a healthy co-parenting relationship. We texted about pickup times and school events. She included me in group messages about the kids' activities. When Lily came down with strep throat during David's weekend, Sarah dropped off medicine and soup without making it weird. "You're so lucky," my friend Jess said over drinks one night. "Most women have to deal with psycho ex-wives. Sarah sounds like she's actually making things easier." "She really is," I agreed. "David says she's always been good about putting the kids first." What I didn't mention, what I was only just beginning to notice, was how often David and Sarah talked. Not just about the kids, but about everything. They'd text throughout the day about random things, articles they'd read, movies they wanted to see, memories from their shared past that somehow related to current events. "Sarah saw that documentary about the housing crisis," David would say at dinner. "She said it reminded her of that paper I wrote in law school about predatory lending." Or, "Sarah's thinking about getting Jake tested for ADHD. She found this great article about alternative approaches to medication." Always Sarah this, Sarah that. Always Sarah's opinions carrying weight in our household decisions. Sarah's recommendations shaping our weekend plans. Sarah's preferences somehow factoring into conversations she wasn't even part of. I told myself it was normal, healthy, even. They had children together. Of course, they needed to communicate. But then David proposed, and everything changed. Chapter 4. The Engagement. David proposed on a Saturday morning in February, right there in our kitchen while I was making pancakes. Nothing fancy, just him getting down on one knee beside the stove, holding up a ring that took my breath away. "Emma Rodriguez," he said, using my full name like he was making an official proclamation. "Will you marry me?" I said yes before I'd even fully processed the question. The ring was perfect. A vintage setting with a round diamond that caught the morning light streaming through our windows. We called our parents, texted our friends, and spent the rest of the day planning our future. "Small wedding," I said, curled up against him on the couch. "Maybe just family and close friends?" "I'm thinking September." "September sounds perfect," David agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "The kids will love being part of the ceremony." "And Sarah will be okay with it?" I don't know why I asked. The question just slipped out, like some part of my subconscious was already sensing trouble. David pulled back to look at me. Why wouldn't she be? I don't know. Some ex-wives have feelings about their ex-husbands remarrying. Sarah's not like that, David said firmly. She wants me to be happy. She's been encouraging me to propose for months. She's been encouraging him. I smiled and nodded, but something cold settled in my stomach. Since when did ex-wives encourage their former husbands to propose to other women? Since when was that normal? But I pushed the feeling aside. I was engaged. I was happy. I wasn't going to let paranoia ruin the best day of my life. The next morning, David called Sarah to tell her the news. Sarah says congratulations, he announced, hanging up the phone. She's really excited for us. That's great. She wants to take us both out to celebrate. Dinner at Romano's next Friday. I paused in the middle of buttering my toast. She wants to take us out? Yeah. She says it's important to celebrate big moments as a family unit. For the kids, you know? Family unit. The phrase made my skin crawl, though I couldn't exactly say why. Don't you think that's a little... I searched for the right word. Unusual? David's expression hardened. Unusual how? I don't know. Most ex-wives don't throw engagement parties for their ex-husbands. Sarah's not most ex-wives, David said, his voice taking on that patient tone again. She's the mother of my children. She's going to be in our lives forever. I thought you understood that. There it was again. That phrase that made me feel like I was the one who didn't get it, like I was the one being unreasonable. Of course I understand that, I said quickly. I just thought maybe we could celebrate with our own friends first and then... Emma. David sat down across from me at our little kitchen table, reaching for my hands. I need you to understand something. Sarah and I have worked very hard to build a healthy co-parenting relationship. The kids come first, always. That means sometimes we do things that might seem unusual to other people. But they work for our family. Our family, not his family or their family when referring to him and the kids. Our family, including Sarah. I get that, I said. I do. I'm not trying to change anything, I just... Good, David interrupted, squeezing my hands, because I need to know that you're on board with this. I need to know that you understand that Sarah isn't going anywhere, and that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It means the kids get to have parents who love them and support each other. Support each other. I wanted to ask what that meant exactly. I wanted to ask where I fit into this equation of mutual support. Instead, I nodded and smiled and agreed to dinner at Romano's. That night, I called my mother. "Congratulations, sweetheart," she exclaimed. "Tell me everything. What's the ring like? When's the wedding? Are you thinking church or outdoor?" I answered her questions, but my heart wasn't in it. Finally, I told her about the dinner invitation. "His ex-wife wants to throw you an engagement party?" Mom asked. "That's what David says." "Huh." There was a long pause. "That's nice of her, I suppose." "You think it's weird?" "I think it's unusual," Mom said carefully, "but every family is different. Maybe she's just trying to be supportive." "That's what David says." "Emma, honey, you don't sound very excited about any of this." I stared at my engagement ring, watching it catch the light from the lamp beside our couch. It really was beautiful. Everything about my life with David was beautiful, on paper. "I am excited," I said. "I'm just adjusting, I guess. The co-parenting thing is more complicated than I expected." "It usually is," Mom said gently. "But you'll figure it out. You and David will find your rhythm." You and David. Not you and David and Sarah. My mother had instinctively understood that marriage was supposed to be about two people, not three. I wished I'd trusted that instinct. Chapter 5. Romano's was the kind of restaurant where first dates go well and anniversaries are celebrated. Intimate lighting, excellent wine list. The kind of place that makes you feel like you're in a romantic movie. It was also, I learned that night, where David and Sarah had gone on their first date 12 years earlier. "Oh my God, Emma, you have to try the mushroom risotto," Sarah said, scanning the menu. "It's incredible. David and I used to order it every time we came here." She said it so casually, like it was perfectly normal to recommend the dish she used to share with my fiancé in the same restaurant where they'd fallen in love. David smiled and nodded. "Sarah's right," he said. "The risotto is amazing." I ordered salmon. Sarah had dressed up for the occasion, a flowing black dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and effortless, paired with delicate gold jewelry that caught the candlelight. She looked like she was celebrating something significant. David kept glancing at her throughout dinner, and I found myself studying those glances, trying to decode them. "So," Sarah said, raising her wine glass after we'd ordered, "to Emma and David. To new beginnings and beautiful futures." We clinked glasses, and I tried to ignore the fact that Sarah's toast sounded more like she was officiating our engagement than celebrating it. "Thank you," I said. "This is really sweet of you." "Of course," Sarah beamed. "I'm just so happy for you both. David deserves someone wonderful, and from everything I've seen, you're exactly what he needs." From everything she's seen. I wanted to ask what exactly she'd seen, how much David had shared with her about our relationship, about me. Instead, I smiled and sipped my wine. "The kids are so excited about the wedding," Sarah continued. "Jake asked if he could walk Emma down the aisle, and Lily wants to be the flower girl. I hope that's okay?" "Of course," I said, touched despite myself. "I'd love that." "And I was thinking," Sarah went on, "maybe we could all go dress shopping together? I know it's not traditional, but I thought it might be fun. I could help with Lily's flower girl dress, and maybe give some input on styles that would photograph well with the kids." I nearly choked on my wine. Dress shopping. Together. That's really thoughtful," I managed. "Isn't she amazing?" David said, looking at Sarah with unmistakable admiration. "I told you she'd be excited to help." He told her I'd need help. "I love planning events," Sarah continued. "Actually, I was wondering if you'd thought about a venue yet, because I have some ideas." For the next hour, Sarah outlined her vision for my wedding. She suggested photographers, florists, and caterers. She had opinions about color schemes, seating arrangements, and timeline logistics. She spoke with the kind of detailed enthusiasm that should have been coming from me, the bride, but somehow I found myself just nodding along. "What do you think, Emma?" David asked at one point when Sarah suggested we book the same band that had played at their wedding. "They're really good," I said weakly. "Great." Sarah clapped her hands together. "I'll send you their contact information tomorrow." As we were leaving the restaurant, Sarah pulled me aside while David was getting the car. "Emma," she said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone, "I want you to know how grateful I am that David found you." "Thank you." "No, I mean it." She touched my arm lightly. "After our divorce, I was worried about him. He was so sad, so closed off. But you've brought him back to life. The kids see it too. He's happy again." Her words should have made me feel good. Instead, they made me feel like I was being evaluated, like my performance as David's happiness provider was being assessed by his previous happiness provider. "I love him," I said, because it was true, and because I didn't know what else to say. "I know you do," Sarah said softly. "And he loves you. I can see it. You're going to make him very happy. Make him happy." Like it was my job. Like it was something I had to work at. Something I could succeed or fail at. David pulled up to the curb, and Sarah gave me another one of those warm hugs. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "Thank you for letting me be part of this," she replied. "It means the world to me." In the car, David was practically glowing. "That went so well," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I'm so proud of how you handled that." Handled that. Like dinner with his ex-wife was some kind of test I'd needed to pass. "She's really enthusiastic about the wedding planning," I said. "She loves that stuff, and she's good at it too. Sarah has incredible taste." Sarah has incredible taste. I looked down at my engagement ring and wondered if Sarah had helped pick it out. Chapter 6: Wedding Planning Wars. The next 3 months were a masterclass in passive-aggressive event planning. Sarah inserted herself into every decision with the kind of helpful persistence that made it impossible to object, without seeming ungrateful. "Emma, honey, I found the most amazing florist," she'd text at 7 a.m. "She did my cousin's wedding last year, and the arrangements were breathtaking. I already called and put your date on hold, but you should probably call today to confirm." Or, "Just saw your venue choice online. It's lovely, but have you thought about the parking situation? Also, I noticed they don't allow outside catering, which limits your options significantly. I found 3 other venues that might work better. Sending links now." Every suggestion was perfectly reasonable. Every concern was valid. Every alternative was genuinely better than my original choice. Sarah had impeccable taste, years of event planning experience, and an unlimited amount of time to devote to my wedding. I should have been grateful. Instead, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. "What do you think about this dress?" I asked David one evening, showing him a photo on my phone. "It's nice," he said, barely glancing up from his laptop. "What does Sarah think?" What does Sarah think? That question became the soundtrack to my engagement. What did Sarah think about the venue? What did Sarah think about the menu? What did Sarah think about the band, the flowers, the photographer? "I haven't asked her yet," I said. "You should," David replied absently. "She has good instincts about this stuff." I closed my phone and went to bed early. The breaking point came during dress shopping. Sarah had insisted on coming, and she'd brought along her sister Michelle and her best friend Kate. I'd invited my maid of honor, Jess, and my sister Amy. What should have been an intimate day with my closest people became a group outing with Sarah as the unofficial coordinator. "Emma would look stunning in this," Sarah announced, pulling a dress from the rack. "The cut is so flattering for her figure." The dress was beautiful, a flowing A-line with delicate lace sleeves. Exactly the style I'd been looking for. But hearing Sarah describe my figure like she'd been studying it made my skin crawl. "Try this one too," Kate suggested, holding up a mermaid-style gown. Sarah wore something similar and it was gorgeous. Sarah wore something similar. I tried on 14 dresses that day. And somehow every conversation came back to Sarah's wedding. Sarah's dress, Sarah's choices. "You know what?" Sarah said as I stood on the platform in dress number 12. "This dress reminds me so much of my wedding dress." Same designer, I think. "Emma, you should try the veil I wore. I still have it. And it would look perfect with this." Her veil. She wanted me to wear her veil. "That's so generous," Amy said politely, but I caught her shooting a look at Jess. "I don't know," I said carefully. "I was thinking about something more modern." "Oh, but vintage veils are so romantic," Sarah insisted. "And it would mean so much to the kids to see you wearing something from our family history." Our family history, not their family history, David and Sarah's. Our family history, as if I were joining some pre-existing unit rather than creating something new with David. "Let me think about it," I said. I never did try on Sarah's veil, but the offer hung over the rest of my wedding planning like a cloud. Every choice I made felt like I was rejecting her generosity. And every choice she influenced felt like I was giving up pieces of myself. By the time we'd finalized all the details, I realized I barely recognized my own wedding. The flowers Sarah had suggested were beautiful, but not ones I would have chosen. The band she'd recommended was talented but played music that reminded me more of her taste than mine. Even my dress, while stunning, was something I'd picked to please Sarah rather than myself. "Everything looks perfect," David said the night before the wedding, squeezing my shoulders as we stood in the decorated venue. "Sarah did such an amazing job helping coordinate everything. Sarah did an amazing job. Not we did an amazing job. Not you did an amazing job. Sarah." "Yeah," I said. "She's very talented." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was making a mistake. Not about marrying David, I still loved him, still wanted a life with him, but about the life we were building, about the role I was playing in it. I thought about calling off the wedding. The thought came and went so quickly I almost didn't catch it, but it was there. This fleeting moment of panic where I considered walking away from everything we'd planned. Instead, I closed my eyes and told myself I was just having normal pre-wedding jitters. Every bride felt this way. Everything would be fine once we were married, once we settled into our own rhythm as husband and wife. I was so wrong. Chapter 7. The honeymoon period. That wasn't. We honeymooned in Tuscany for 10 days. It should have been perfect. Rolling hills, incredible food, long afternoons in bed at our little villa outside Florence. And it was perfect. Mostly. When it was just David and me, exploring vineyards and wandering through medieval villages, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. But even in Italy, Sarah found ways to insert herself into our bubble. She texted David photos of the kids every day. Not just one or two, whole albums. Jake at soccer practice, Lily at ballet class, both of them eating breakfast, playing in the backyard, reading bedtime stories. Innocent enough, but the timing was deliberate. The messages always came during our romantic dinners or quiet morning moments, pulling David's attention away from me and back to home. "Look how much Jake's improved at soccer," David would say, showing me his phone across the candlelit table at our anniversary dinner. Or, "Sarah says Lily's been asking when we're coming home. She misses us." Us. Not you. Us. "That's sweet," I'd say, and try to steer the conversation back to us, to our future, to the present moment we were supposed to be sharing. But David's phone was always right there on the table, always lighting up with another message, another photo, another update from the life that apparently couldn't function without his constant attention. On our last night in Italy, we were having dinner at this incredible restaurant overlooking the valley when David's phone rang. "It's Sarah," he said, glancing at the screen. "I should probably take this. She wouldn't call unless it was important." "David, we're at dinner, on our honeymoon." "I know, but what if something's wrong with the kids?" He answered the call. I sat there listening to half a conversation about Lily's upcoming school presentation and Jake's need for new soccer cleats. Important, urgent matters that apparently couldn't wait until we returned home in 12 hours. When he hung up, David seemed almost surprised to find me sitting across from him. "Sorry about that," he said. "Lily's nervous about her presentation tomorrow, and Sarah thought I should call her before bed to give her a pep talk." On our last night? "Emma, she's 5. She needs her dad." She needs her dad. And apparently, Dad's wife's feelings about being interrupted during her honeymoon dinner came second to a 5-year-old's presentation anxiety that could have been handled by her mother. I smiled and nodded, and told myself this was what marrying a man with children meant. This was the sacrifice I'd known I was making. But that night, lying in our beautiful Italian villa, I felt lonelier than I'd felt in years. Chapter 8. The new normal, back home, we settled into married life. On paper, it looked exactly like what I'd expected. David moved his remaining belongings into my apartment. which became our apartment, and we merged our routines, our friend groups, our families. The kids stayed with us every other weekend and one night during the week, just like before. I continued teaching, David continued practicing law, and we fell into the comfortable rhythms of a two-career couple. But Sarah's presence in our marriage felt heavier than it had during our engagement. Maybe it was because I'd expected things to change once we were actually married. Maybe I'd thought David would draw clearer boundaries, prioritize our new family unit over his old one. Instead, the opposite happened. Sarah and I think we should increase the overnight schedule, David announced one evening over dinner. The kids are getting older and they want to spend more time here. Sarah and I think, not I think, or Sarah suggested. Sarah and I think. Like they were still a team making joint parenting decisions and I was just there. That sounds great, I said. Because what else could I say? Of course the kids should spend more time with their father. Of course I wanted them to feel welcome in our home. But every expansion of the custody schedule meant more coordination with Sarah, more phone calls, more text messages, more opportunities for her to weigh in on decisions that affected our household. Sarah thinks we should get Jake into travel soccer, David would say. Sarah found this great summer camp for Lily. Sarah's pediatrician recommended we get Jake's vision checked. Always Sarah thinking, Sarah finding, Sarah recommending. Never David independently researching options or making decisions about his own children. Always Sarah leading and David following, with me trailing somewhere behind them both. The worst part was that I couldn't object to any of it. Every decision was reasonable, every suggestion was thoughtful. Every recommendation was in the kids' best interest. How do you argue with someone who's trying to get your stepson into a better soccer league? How do you complain about a woman who's looking out for your stepdaughter's educational needs? You don't. You smile and nod and try to convince yourself that this is normal, that this is healthy, that this is what successful co-parenting looks like. Chapter 9. Weekend erosion. It started small, like most relationship problems do. Sarah would need to drop off Jake's forgotten soccer uniform during our weekend. She'd stay for a few minutes to chat with the kids, maybe have a cup of coffee while David gathered Jake's gear. Then it became picking up Lily for an impromptu playdate with her cousin. Sarah would come in while Lily got ready, and somehow she'd end up staying for lunch because the kids insisted. Then it was family birthday parties where of course Sarah needed to be there. And wasn't it easier for everyone if she just came over early to help set up? Before I knew it, Sarah was spending significant portions of every weekend at our house. Not officially. She wasn't invited exactly. But there was always some kid-related reason for her to be there, and David never seemed to think it was strange. It's good for the kids to see us all getting along, he'd say when I tentatively brought up the frequency of Sarah's visits. Of course, I'd agree. I just thought maybe we could have some weekends that are just us, family time. We are family, David would say. All of us. That includes Sarah. All of us. That includes Sarah. I tried to make peace with it. I tried to see Sarah's constant presence as a positive thing, proof that we'd successfully created a harmonious blended family, evidence that the kids were thriving in an environment where their parents got along. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in someone else's life, that I was playing a supporting role in a story where Sarah and David were the leads, and the kids were the central plot, and I was just background. The breaking point came on a Saturday in October. David's birthday. I'd planned a quiet celebration, just us and the kids, his favorite dinner, a chocolate cake Lily and I had baked together. Nothing fancy, but intimate and special. Sarah showed up at 3 o'clock with a gift. I can't stay long, she said, breezing into our kitchen like she lived there. I just wanted to drop this off. The gift was a watch. An expensive, beautiful, perfectly chosen watch that David had been wanting for months. The same watch I'd been secretly saving up to buy him for Christmas. "Sarah, this is too much," David said, but his eyes lit up as he opened the box. "Nonsense," Sarah said, waving him off. "You only turned 39 once. Besides, the kids helped me pick it out." The kids helped. Of course they had. So now if David ever questioned the appropriateness of such an expensive gift from his ex-wife, he'd also be questioning his children's involvement in choosing it. "It's beautiful," I said, because it was, and because I couldn't think of anything else to say. "I'll just stay for a minute to see how it looks," Sarah said, settling onto our couch like she belonged there. She stayed for 4 hours. She stayed through David's birthday dinner, insisting that she wasn't hungry but picking at the food I'd prepared. She stayed through cake, laughing at inside jokes and sharing memories from previous birthdays. She stayed until Jake and Lily were practically asleep on the couch, and then she offered to help clean up the dishes. "No need," I said quickly. "I've got it." "Don't be silly," Sarah said, already rolling up her sleeves. "Many hands make light work." So I spent my husband's birthday doing dishes with his ex-wife while he put their children to bed, and somehow I was the one who felt like an intruder in my own home. That night, after Sarah had finally left, I confronted David. "I feel like Sarah was here for most of your birthday," I said carefully. "She was just being nice." "I know, but don't you think it was a little much? The expensive gift, staying for dinner, helping clean up?" David was quiet for a long moment, sitting on the edge of our bed in his pajamas, still wearing the watch Sarah had given him. "Emma," he said finally, "I need you to understand something. Sarah and I are going to be in each other's lives forever. We have children together. We've built a good relationship, a healthy relationship, and that's not something I'm willing to compromise. I'm not asking you to compromise anything. I'm just asking for some boundaries." "What kind of boundaries?" "I don't know. Maybe she doesn't need to stay for every meal. Maybe expensive gifts aren't appropriate. Maybe our weekends don't always need to include her." David stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. "You're jealous," he said quietly. "I'm not jealous. I'm confused about my role in this family. Your role is to be my wife, to love me and support me and help me raise my children. Help him raise his children, not help us raise our children or even help raise the children, his children, which I was allowed to help with, like a babysitter or an au pair." "And what's Sarah's role?" I asked. David turned around and his expression was harder than I'd ever seen it. "Sarah is their mother," he said. "She's their mother, Emma. That's not going to change, no matter how much it might bother you. No matter how much it might bother me, like I was the problem. Like, I was the unreasonable one for wanting my marriage to feel like a marriage instead of an extension of his previous relationship." I didn't say anything else that night. I went to sleep next to my husband, both of us lying on our respective sides of the bed, and I stared at the ceiling for hours thinking about how we'd gotten to this point. Chapter 10. The Ultimatum. Things got worse before they got better. Or maybe they never got better. Maybe I just got better at pretending they were tolerable. Sarah started dropping by during the week, not just on weekends. She'd pick up the kids from school and bring them to our house, staying for homework help or dinner or just to chat. She'd call David at work about non-urgent kid stuff, and he'd always take her calls, even if he was in meetings or we were spending time together. Her presence became so constant that I started feeling like a guest in my own home, like I needed permission to rearrange furniture or change the dinner plans or suggest family activities. "We should ask Sarah what she thinks," became David's automatic response to any suggestion I made about the kids. "Sarah might have other plans," was his go-to excuse when I tried to schedule family time. Sarah knows the kids better than anyone, was his standard defense when I questioned her input on decisions that should have been ours to make. I started keeping track, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. For 1 week in November, I documented every time Sarah's name came up in conversation, every text message from her that interrupted our time together, every decision that got deferred to her opinion. The results were staggering. In 7 days, David mentioned Sarah 43 times. She texted him 18 times about non-urgent matters. She called him 6 times during our evenings together. She influenced or vetoed 4 separate family decisions. 43 times in 1 week, my husband brought up his ex-wife in casual conversation, as if she were a close friend, a family member, a constant presence in his mental landscape. I showed him the list on a Sunday night after the kids had gone to bed. "This is insane, Emma," David said, staring at the paper. "You actually kept track of how often I mentioned Sarah?" I needed to know if I was imagining things. "This is..." He shook his head. "This is disturbing behavior." Disturbing behavior. My attempt to understand why I felt invisible in my own marriage was disturbing behavior. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "in 1 week you mentioned your ex-wife 43 times. You prioritized her calls over our conversations 6 times. You deferred to her judgment on decisions about our household 4 times. Don't you think that's worth talking about? She's the mother of my children. She's not the mother of our marriage." The words hung between us like a challenge. For the first time in months, I'd said exactly what I was thinking without trying to soften it, without trying to make it palatable. David stared at me for a long moment. "What exactly are you asking me to do, Emma?" "I'm asking you to act like you're married to me, not to her." "I am married to you?" "Then start acting like it. Stop including her in every decision. Stop taking her calls during our time together. Stop treating our home like it belongs to all 3 of us." "And what about the kids? What about them? They can have a relationship with both their parents without Sarah being involved in every aspect of our marriage." David walked to the window, the same spot he'd gone to during our last fight about this. His thinking spot, apparently. "You're asking me to choose," he said finally. "I'm asking you to prioritize. Between my children's happiness and your comfort." Your comfort. Like wanting to feel like the most important woman in my husband's life was just a matter of comfort, not a basic requirement of marriage. "Between your wife and your ex-wife," I corrected. David turned around and I saw something in his face that made my stomach drop. "I can't do what you're asking," he said quietly. "Which part?" "Any of it. I can't cut Sarah out of our lives. I can't stop consulting her about the kids. I can't pretend like she doesn't matter to me. Matter to him." There it was, finally, the truth we'd been dancing around for months. "She matters to you," I repeated. "Of course she matters to me. She's the mother of my children. She's part of my family." "What am I?" David looked genuinely confused by the question. "You're my wife. And what does that mean to you?" "It means I love you. It means I want to build a life with you. A life that includes Sarah as a central figure. A life that includes my children, which means it includes Sarah." "Yes." I nodded slowly, finally understanding the choice I was being offered. I could accept David's version of marriage, one where his ex-wife was a permanent third party, where my role was to support and accommodate and never complain, or I could leave. "I need some time to think," I said. "Emma?" "No, David. I need time. I'm going to stay at my sister's for a few days." I packed a bag while David stood in our bedroom doorway, watching me fold clothes with the careful precision of someone trying not to fall apart. "This is really what you want?" he asked as I zipped up my suitcase. "You want to blow up our marriage because I have a good relationship with my kid's mother?" "Blow up our marriage." Like I was the one being destructive. Like I was the one who had introduced chaos into our relationship. I want to save our marriage, I said, but I can't do it alone. Chapter 11. Clarity. My sister Amy lived in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill, barely big enough for one person, let alone two. But she cleared space for me without question, made up the couch with her best sheets, and stocked the refrigerator with wine and ice cream. "Tell me everything," she said the first night, settling beside me with 2 glasses of Pinot Grigio. So I did. I told her about the constant phone calls, the weekend intrusions, the feeling of being a supporting character in my own life. I told her about the birthday watch, the wedding planning, the way David's face lit up whenever Sarah's name appeared on his screen. Amy listened without interrupting, occasionally refilling my wine glass, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Em," she said when I finally finished, "this isn't normal." "David says it is. He says this is what healthy co-parenting looks like." Healthy co-parenting is communicating about the kids' needs, coordinating schedules, and presenting a united front on discipline. It's not whatever this is. Maybe I'm being unreasonable. Maybe I knew what I was signing up for when I married a divorced father. Amy shook her head firmly. "Did he tell you before you got married that Sarah would essentially be living in your house, that she'd have input on every decision, that he'd take her calls during your dinner dates and consult her opinion before making household choices?" "No." "Then you didn't sign up for this. This is something else entirely." Something else entirely. I'd been trying so hard to convince myself that what I was experiencing was normal that I'd lost sight of what normal actually looked like. "What do you think I should do?" Amy was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in her glass. "I think you should ask yourself what you want your marriage to look like," she said finally. "Not what David wants, not what Sarah wants, not what's best for the kids. What do you want from your marriage?" I'd never asked myself that question. Not directly. I'd spent so much time trying to fit into the life David had already built that I'd never stopped to consider what kind of life I actually wanted to build with him. That night, I lay on Amy's couch and made a mental list of what I wanted. I wanted to be my husband's first call when something important happened. I wanted our weekends to belong to us, not to his ex-wife's schedule. I wanted to make decisions about our household without consulting a third party. I wanted to feel like David's primary relationship, not his secondary one. I wanted to matter more than his ex-wife. Writing it out like that, even just in my head, I realized how reasonable my expectations were. They weren't demands for him to abandon his children or ignore their mother completely. They were basic requirements for a marriage to function. The question was whether David could give me those things, whether he wanted to. Chapter 12. The conversation I stayed at Amy's for 5 days. David texted constantly at first, asking when I was coming home, insisting we could work things out, promising he understood my concerns. But his messages got less frequent as the week went on, and I suspected Sarah had filled the Emma-shaped hole in his schedule without much difficulty. When I finally came home, I found David in our kitchen, making dinner for the kids. It was his Wednesday night, and Jake was doing homework at the counter while Lily colored at the table. "Emma!" Lily squealed, launching herself at me with the kind of enthusiasm that made my heart ache. "Where were you? Daddy said you were visiting Amy, but you were gone forever." "I missed you too, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tight. Jake looked up from his math worksheet and smiled. "Mom made your favorite cookies," he said, pointing to a plate on the counter. "She said you'd probably want them when you got home." Mom made cookies. Sarah had been here, baking in my kitchen, taking care of my husband and stepchildren while I was gone. The message was clear. I was dispensable. Sarah could step into my role without missing a beat. That was thoughtful, I managed. After dinner, after homework was finished and stories were read and the kids were tucked into bed, David and I finally sat down to talk. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, settling beside me on our couch. About boundaries and priorities. And I think you're right. I think maybe Sarah and I have gotten too comfortable with the way things were, and we haven't made enough space for what things are now. I felt a flutter of hope. What does that mean? It means I'm willing to make some changes, fewer phone calls during our time together. Maybe Sarah doesn't need to weigh in on every decision. I could be more intentional about protecting our space as a couple. Could be more intentional. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement of change, but it was something. What about the weekends? I asked. David hesitated. What about them? David, Sarah spent 4 hours here last weekend. She's here almost every time the kids are here. I feel like I'm sharing custody of you. She's not here that often. She was here 3 out of the last 4 weekends. For significant amounts of time. David was quiet, processing this. Look, he said finally. I can try to be more aware of it. I can try to limit the overlap. Try to limit the overlap, like Sarah's presence was some kind of scheduling conflict rather than a fundamental boundary issue. David, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to be cruel to Sarah. I'm not asking you to damage your co-parenting relationship. But I need to feel like I'm your primary relationship. I need to feel like our marriage matters more than your friendship with your ex-wife. It does matter more. Then act like it. David reached for my hands. Emma, I love you. I want this to work. Tell me exactly what you need, and I'll try to make it happen. Try. Always try. Never commit. Never I will or I promise or absolutely. Always I'll try. But it was better than nothing. It was better than the conversation we'd had before I left. I need Sarah's visits to have a purpose and a time limit, I said. If she's dropping off soccer equipment, she drops it off and leaves. If she's picking up the kids, she picks them up and leaves. No more casual hanging out. No more staying for meals unless it's a special occasion. David nodded slowly. I need you to stop taking her calls during our time together unless it's an emergency. Okay. I need decisions about our household, what we eat, how we spend our weekends, what rules we have for the kids when they're here, to be made by us, not by committee. That makes sense. And I need you to talk to her about the boundaries. I need you to explain that things are going to change, so she doesn't think I'm being hostile or unwelcoming. David's expression shifted slightly. You want me to have a conversation with Sarah about limiting her involvement? I want you to have a conversation with Sarah about respecting our marriage. He was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said finally. I'll talk to her. We shook hands like we were making a business deal, which in some ways, I suppose we were. Chapter 13. The Shiyan. For about 3 weeks, David kept his promises. He didn't take Sarah's calls during our dinners together. He consulted me before making decisions about weekend plans. When Sarah dropped off school forms, she actually left instead of settling in for coffee and conversation. I started to relax. I started to believe that maybe we'd turned a corner, that maybe our marriage could work after all. Then Jake got sick. It was nothing serious, just a stomach bug that kept him home from school for 2 days. But somehow, Sarah ended up spending both days at our house, nursing him back to health and coordinating his care. She's just worried about him, David explained when I came home from work to find Sarah making soup in our kitchen. You know how she gets when the kids are sick? How she gets. Like her hovering over a minor illness was charming rather than excessive. Where are you? I asked David. I'm working from the home office. I'm available if she needs me. If she needs me. Sarah was in charge of caring for David's sick child in David's house while David worked, and I was… What? The person who came home at the end of the day to find this arrangement already in place? David, I said quietly, this is exactly what we talked about. Emma, he's sick. What was I supposed to do? Make Sarah take him to her place where she couldn't monitor him properly? You were supposed to take care of your own sick child, or at least be part of the decision about who would. I am taking care of him. I'm working from home so I can help. Help Sarah, who was apparently the primary caregiver even in our house. That night, after Sarah had finally left and Jake was feeling better, I tried to talk to David about what had happened. You said you'd set boundaries, I reminded him. I did set boundaries, but Jake being sick is different. That's an emergency situation. A stomach bug is an emergency? You don't have kids, Emma. You don't understand what it's like when they're suffering. You don't have kids. The trump card. The ultimate dismissal of my feelings, my perspective, my role in the family. I understand that sick children need care, I said carefully. What I don't understand is why that care always has to come from Sarah, even when he's at our house. Because she's his mother. And you're his father. Emma. David's voice carried a warning. Don't make this about Sarah versus you. This is about what's best for Jake. What's best for Jake? Another trump card. How do you argue with someone who claims the moral high ground of child welfare? But I was starting to realize that what's best for Jake and what Sarah wants had become synonymous in David's mind. And what Emma needs didn't factor into the equation at all. Chapter 14. The Breaking Point. The final straw came in February, almost exactly 1 year after David had proposed. We'd planned a romantic weekend getaway to Napa Valley, just the two of us, no kids, no responsibilities. I'd booked the hotel, made dinner reservations, arranged time off from work. On Thursday night, as I was packing, David's phone rang. It's Sarah, he said, and answered without hesitation. I listened to half a conversation about some crisis with Lily's school project. Apparently, she'd forgotten to mention a diorama that was due Monday, and she was melting down about it. We'll figure it out, David was saying. Maybe we can work on it this weekend. This weekend. Our romantic weekend. The weekend I'd planned and paid for and been looking forward to for months. David, I said when he hung up, we're leaving for Napa tomorrow. I know, but Lily really needs help with this project. Lily needs help that she could get from her mother, or from us when we get back on Sunday. Emma, she's 8 years old. She's terrified she's going to fail. She's not going to fail. It's one assignment. David looked at me like I'd suggested abandoning a child in the wilderness. I can't leave when my daughter is this upset, he said. I can't leave. Not we should postpone or let's reschedule. I can't leave. As if I weren't part of the decision. So, what are you suggesting? Maybe we could push the trip back a week? David, I've already arranged time off. The hotel reservations are non-refundable. We've been planning this for months. I know, and I'm sorry, but Lily's school project is more important than our marriage. That's not fair. Isn't it? You're literally choosing to cancel our romantic weekend to help your 8-year-old with a project she forgot about, that her mother could help her with. That could wait until we get back. David was quiet for a moment. What if Sarah brought the kids to Napa? He suggested. We could still have our weekend, but I could help Lily with the project in the evenings. What if Sarah came to Napa, on our romantic getaway, to help with a school project? I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just suggested. You want to invite your ex-wife on our romantic weekend? Not invite her exactly. Just, she could get a separate room and… David, stop talking. Something in my voice must have warned him because he immediately went quiet. I need you to hear what you just said, I continued, my voice deadly calm. I need you to hear that when faced with choosing between your wife and your ex-wife, you suggested bringing your ex-wife along. That's not what That's exactly what you suggested. Rather than disappoint Sarah by making her handle her own daughter's crisis, you suggested including her in our romantic weekend. I was trying to find a compromise. You were trying to avoid choosing between us. David sat down on our bed, looking genuinely confused. Emma, what do you want me to do? Abandon my daughter when she needs me? I want you to act like you're married to me, not co-parenting with Sarah. I don't understand the difference. I don't understand the difference. There it was, the crux of our entire problem. David genuinely didn't see a difference between being married to me and being co-parents with Sarah. In his mind, we were all just one big, happy family unit, and my desire for primacy was selfish and unreasonable. The difference, I said slowly, is that marriage means choosing each other first. It means that when there's a conflict between what your spouse needs and what your ex-wife wants, you choose your spouse. Even if it hurts the kids? Lily making a diorama with her mother instead of her father isn't going to hurt her, David. You don't know that. You don't know that. Again, with the suggestion that I couldn't understand child welfare because I wasn't a biological parent. I walked to our closet and pulled out a larger suitcase. What are you doing? David asked. I'm packing. For Napa? No, David, I'm packing to leave. The words came out so calmly that it took me a moment to realize I'd said them. But as soon as they were out there, I knew they were true. Emma, don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being realistic. This isn't working. What isn't working? This marriage. This arrangement. Whatever this is. David stood up, suddenly alert. You're talking about divorce? I'm talking about the fact that you just suggested bringing your ex-wife on our romantic weekend rather than disappoint her, and you don't see anything wrong with that. You were trying to avoid choosing between us. And that tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in your priorities. I continued packing, moving methodically through our shared closet, our shared dresser, our shared life. Emma, please, let's talk about this. We have been talking about it for months, and nothing changes. Things have changed. I've been better about the boundaries. You've been marginally better for 3 weeks, and the moment there was any pressure, you immediately reverted to putting Sarah's needs ahead of mine. I'm putting the kids' needs first. No, David, you're putting Sarah's version of the kids' needs first. There's a difference. He was quiet while I continued packing. Where will you go? He asked finally. I don't know yet. Amy's, maybe, or a hotel. For how long? I stopped packing and looked at him directly. I don't know, David. Maybe forever. Chapter 15. The Flight. I didn't go to Napa that weekend. Instead, I spent Saturday morning on travel websites, scrolling through destination options with the kind of manic energy that comes from making life-changing decisions. Paris was too expensive. Mexico felt too cliché. Hawaii seemed too romantic for a solo trip born out of marital crisis. Then I saw it. A last-minute deal to Prague. 7 days departing Sunday morning, including hotel and flights. The kind of impulsive choice I'd never made before. The kind of adventure I'd always said I wanted to take someday. Someday had become today. I booked it without calling David. I booked it without telling Amy or my parents or anyone who might try to talk me out of it. I just entered my credit card information and confirmed the booking and felt something like relief wash over me. When David came home Sunday afternoon, after presumably spending the weekend helping Lily with her diorama, I was waiting for him with my bags packed and my boarding pass printed. Emma, he said, seeing the luggage by the door. What's going on? I'm going to Prague. Prague? When? Tonight. My flight leaves at 11. David stared at me like I'd announced I was flying to Mars. "This is insane," he said. "You can't just run away to Europe because we had a fight." "I'm not running away. I'm taking a trip that I should have taken years ago, before I got so tangled up in trying to be the perfect stepmother that I forgot who I was." "Emma, please. Let's talk about this rationally." "We've talked about it rationally. We've talked about it for months. Nothing changes. Things can change. I can do better." "David, you suggested bringing Sarah on our romantic weekend. That's not a small boundary slip. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of what marriage means." He sat down heavily on our couch, looking genuinely stunned. "I don't want you to go," he said quietly. "I know, but I need to." "What does this mean for us?" I sat down across from him, leaving space between us that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I love you, David. I love the kids. I love the life we could have together if you could figure out how to prioritize it." "I do prioritize it." "You prioritize Sarah's comfort. You prioritize avoiding conflict with Sarah. You prioritize maintaining the status quo that keeps Sarah happy. You don't prioritize our marriage." David was quiet for a long time. "What do you want me to do?" he asked finally. "I want you to figure out what you want. Not what Sarah wants, not what's easiest for the kids, not what avoids conflict. What do you want?" "I want my family to be happy." "Which family?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. "Do you mean your family with Sarah and the kids?" I continued. "Or your family with me and the kids? Because right now, you're trying to keep everyone happy, and the only person who's miserable is me. I don't want you to be miserable. Then make a choice." "Emma." "No, David. I'm done talking about this. I'm done negotiating for basic respect in my own marriage. I'm going to Prague, and while I'm gone, you need to decide what kind of marriage you want to have." "How long will you be gone?" "A week, maybe longer. I'll let you know." I stood up and grabbed my bags. David followed me to the door. "I love you," he said as I reached for the handle. "I love you too," I said. "But love isn't enough if you can't figure out how to choose me." Chapter 16. Prague in February was cold and gray and absolutely perfect for someone trying to figure out her life. I spent my days wandering through medieval streets, taking photographs of Gothic architecture, and sitting in warm cafes, writing in a journal I'd bought at the airport. I wrote about my marriage, about the slow erosion of my self-worth, about the way I'd gradually accepted less and less until I'd forgotten what I deserved. I wrote about Sarah, about David, about the kids I'd fallen in love with, and the life I'd thought we were building together. But I also wrote about me, about the person I'd been before I met David, the dreams I'd set aside, the adventures I'd postponed. I wrote about the teacher I wanted to be, the places I wanted to see, the woman I wanted to become. On my third day, I met Klaus at a coffee shop near the Charles Bridge. He was German, visiting Prague on business, and he struck up a conversation when he heard me ordering in English. We talked for 2 hours about travel, about books, about life. Nothing romantic. Just the kind of easy conversation I'd forgotten was possible with someone who didn't know my history. "You seem sad," Klaus observed as we parted ways. "I'm figuring some things out," I said. "Ah." He nodded knowingly. "Prague is good for that. Something about the bridges, I think. They make you consider what you're crossing toward and what you're leaving behind." That night, I called Amy from my hotel room. "How's Prague?" she asked. "Beautiful, complicated, clarifying." "And how are you?" I looked out my hotel window at the city lights reflecting on the Vltava River. "I think I'm getting divorced," I said. Amy was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel about that?" "Sad, relieved, terrified, free." That sounds about right. Amy, what if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm giving up on something good because I couldn't figure out how to share? From everything you've told me, you weren't being asked to share. You were being asked to disappear. Being asked to disappear. That was exactly what it had felt like, though I'd never articulated it so clearly. David's been texting, I said. What does he say? I scrolled through the messages on my phone. Dozens of them, ranging from apologetic to angry to pleading. He says he understands now. He says he's talked to Sarah about boundaries. He says he wants to fix things. Do you believe him? I want to. But Amy, he's said all of this before. After every fight, he promises things will change, and they do for a week or two. And then, we're right back where we started. What does your gut tell you? I closed my eyes and tried to listen to the voice I'd been ignoring for months. My gut tells me that David will never choose me over Sarah because he doesn't see them as competing priorities. In his mind, keeping Sarah happy is choosing his family, which includes me. He thinks I should be grateful to be included. And are you? Grateful to be included? I laughed, but it came out bitter. Amy, I'm his wife. I shouldn't have to be grateful to be included in my own marriage. Chapter 17. The revelation. On my 5th day in Prague, David called instead of texting. Emma, please come home, he said without preamble. We need to talk in person. We've talked in person, David, multiple times. This is different. I've figured some things out. What things? I can't do this over the phone. Please just come home. I'm not ready to come home. Emma, I've made changes. Real changes. I've talked to Sarah. I've set boundaries. David, stop. I don't want to hear about the changes you've made in the 5 days I've been gone. I want you to understand why I needed to leave in the first place. There was a long pause. I'm trying to understand, he said finally. Are you? Or are you trying to figure out what to say to get me to come back so everything can go back to normal? I don't want things to go back to normal. I want things to be better. Better how? Another pause. I want you to be happy, he said. David, that's not an answer. That's what you always say. You want me to be happy, but you're not willing to make the changes that would actually make me happy. What changes? Tell me specifically what you want, and I'll do it. Tell me specifically what you want. Like I hadn't been telling him for months. I want to feel like your wife instead of your roommate. You are my wife. I want to feel like your primary relationship instead of your secondary one. You are my primary relationship. I want you to choose me when there's a conflict between what I need and what Sarah wants. Silence. David? That's more complicated than you're making it sound. No, it's not. It's exactly as simple as I'm making it sound. Emma, I can't just ignore Sarah's needs. I'm not asking you to ignore them. I'm asking you to prioritize mine. What if they conflict? Then you choose me. That's what marriage means. More silence. David, are you there? I'm here. I'm thinking. About what? About whether I can give you what you're asking for? Whether he could give me what I was asking for. Not whether he wanted to, or whether it was reasonable, or whether he understood why I needed it. Whether he could. And? I don't know, he said quietly. I honestly don't know if I can choose you over Sarah when it comes to the kids. There it was. Finally. The truth we'd been dancing around for months. Thank you for being honest, I said. Emma, don't... No, David. Thank you. For the first time in this entire conversation, you've told me the truth. You don't know if you can choose your wife over your ex-wife. That's all I needed to know. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You just don't want it to be. I hung up the phone and sat on my hotel room bed staring at the wall. After months of fighting and negotiating and compromising, David had finally given me the answer I'd been afraid to hear. He couldn't choose me. He wouldn't choose me. I wasn't his priority. I never had been. I never would be. And strangely, knowing that felt like relief. Chapter 18. Extended Stay. I extended my stay in Prague for another week, then another. I told my school I was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons, and my principal, who knew me well enough to read between the lines, was understanding and supportive. "Take all the time you need," she said. "Your job will be here when you're ready." I found a small apartment near Wenceslas Square, nothing fancy but comfortable and mine. I enrolled in a Czech language class at the local community center and started taking long walks along the river. I read books I'd been meaning to read for years, visited museums, wrote in my journal every morning with coffee and pastry from the bakery downstairs. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. David's texts became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Amy kept me updated on the situation at home. Apparently, Sarah had increased her presence even more now that I was gone, essentially moving into our apartment to help with the kids and keep David company. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore," Amy reported during one of our weekly calls. "Jess saw them at the grocery store together last weekend, looking like a family with Jake and Lily." Looking like a family. Because that's what they were, I realized. That's what they'd always been. I'd been the interloper, the newcomer trying to insert herself into a pre-existing family unit. David had never really left his first marriage, he'd just added me to it. "How do you feel about that?" Amy asked. "Relieved," I said, and was surprised to find that I meant it. I'm relieved that I don't have to pretend anymore that I'm okay with being the third wheel in my own marriage. "Are you thinking about divorce?" "I'm thinking about a lot of things." I was thinking about divorce, yes, but I was also thinking about the life I could build if I stayed in Prague. I'd fallen in love with the city, with the freedom, with the version of myself that existed here. I'd started looking into teaching opportunities for English speakers, researching visa requirements, imagining what it would be like to start over completely. Chapter 19. The decision. I'd been in Prague for 3 weeks when I got the text message that changed everything. It wasn't from David. It was from Sarah. "Emma, I hope you're doing well. I know this is probably unwelcome, but I felt like I needed to reach out. I never meant for things to get so complicated. I hope you can forgive me." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "There's nothing to forgive. You were just being yourself." Her response came quickly. "I think I was being selfish. I liked having David's attention. I liked feeling like we were still a team. I didn't think about how that affected you. I appreciate you saying that. For what it's worth, I think David loves you. Really loves you. He's been miserable since you left. He has a funny way of showing love. He doesn't know how to let go. Of me, of our marriage, of the family we used to be. I think he's been trying to recreate what we had, but with you included. That's not fair to anyone." I read her message 3 times before responding. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been watching him try to have both relationships, and it's not working. It's not fair to you, and honestly, it's not fair to me either. I deserve someone who chooses me completely, not someone who's still married to his ex-wife in everything but name." Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I think it's time for both of us to stop settling for pieces of David and start looking for men who can give us everything. The conversation continued for another hour, 2 women finally being honest about the impossible situation we'd all created. Sarah admitted she'd been holding on to David because she was scared of being alone, scared of really moving on from their marriage. I admitted I'd been holding on to David because I was scared I'd never find love again, never have the family I'd always wanted. By the end of the conversation, we'd both acknowledged what I'd been afraid to say out loud. David wasn't capable of the kind of marriage I needed, and I wasn't capable of the kind of sharing he required. "What will you do?" I asked her. "I'm going to start dating. Really dating, not just talking to guys while keeping David as my safety net." "What about you?" "I'm going to stay in Prague for a while. Maybe permanently?" "That sounds amazing. I'm actually jealous." It was strange, talking to Sarah like this. Like we were friends instead of rivals. Like we were two women who'd both been trying to love a man who couldn't love either of us the way we deserved. That night, I called a lawyer. Chapter 20. Paperwork. The divorce process was surprisingly straightforward. No kids together, minimal shared assets, two people who'd finally admitted they wanted different things. David didn't contest anything. I think he was as relieved as I was to stop pretending our marriage could work. We handled most of it through lawyers and email. I stayed in Prague, working on getting my teaching certification recognized and slowly building a new life. David stayed in Seattle with the kids and, I assumed, with Sarah, though I tried not to think about that too much. The only time we spoke directly was when he called to discuss dividing our belongings. "You can have everything," I told him. "I don't want anything from that apartment." "Emma, that's not fair. Half of it is yours." "David, I'm starting over. I don't want reminders." "What about the photo albums? The wedding gifts?" "Give the wedding gifts to Goodwill. Keep the photos if you want them." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry it ended like this." "I'm not," I said, and realized I meant it. "I'm sorry we both spent so much time trying to make something work that was never going to work. But I'm not sorry it ended. Are you happy?" I looked out the window of my Prague apartment at the medieval spires and the river and the life I was building brick by brick. "I'm getting there," I said. Chapter 21. New Beginnings. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I got a job teaching English at an international school in Prague. It wasn't glamorous, mostly teaching business professionals and teenagers whose parents wanted them to be bilingual, but it was mine. I was good at it, and I was happy. I also started dating. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates with men I met through work or friends I'd made in my Czech language class. It was strange, being single again at 30, but also liberating. I could make plans without checking with anyone. I could travel on weekends without coordinating schedules. I could have conversations without being interrupted by someone else's ex-wife. Klaus, the German businessman I'd met during my first week, came back to Prague for work every few months. We started meeting for dinner when he was in town, and those dinners gradually became something more. He was divorced too, with a teenage daughter who lived with his ex-wife in Berlin. But when I met her during a visit to Germany, it was clear that Klaus's relationship with his ex was exactly what co-parenting should be: polite, functional, and completely separate from his relationship with me. "We talk about Greta's school schedule and medical appointments," he explained when I asked about their communication. "That's it. We're not friends. We're not enemies. We're just two people who share a child." Just two people who share a child. Not an ongoing emotional entanglement. Not a secondary marriage masquerading as co-parenting. Just a practical arrangement focused on their daughter's needs. It was a revelation. Chapter 22. Looking back, a year after I left Seattle, Amy came to visit me in Prague. We spent a week exploring the city, drinking excellent Czech beer, and talking about everything that had happened. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one evening as we sat by the river watching the sunset. "Which part?" "Any of it. Marrying David, leaving David, moving here." I thought about it for a while. "I regret not standing up for myself sooner," I said finally. I regret trying so hard to be the cool, understanding stepmother that I forgot to be a wife. But I don't regret marrying David because it taught me what I actually want in a relationship, and I definitely don't regret leaving. What do you want in a relationship? Someone who chooses me. Not because they have to, not because I'm the best available option, but because they want to. Someone who sees me as their primary relationship, not their secondary one. And Klaus? I smiled, thinking about the man who'd flown in from Berlin the night before just to meet Amy, who'd brought flowers and taken us both out to dinner without making it feel like an imposition. Klaus chooses me, I said, every day, even when it's inconvenient, even when it complicates his schedule, even when his ex-wife has opinions about it. He chooses me. That must be nice. It's revolutionary, I said. I didn't know relationships could feel this easy. Amy raised her beer in a toast. To choosing yourself first, so someone else can choose you second. We clinked glasses as the sun set over Prague, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete satisfaction with my life. Chapter 23. Full Circle. 2 years after I moved to Prague, I got an unexpected email from David. Emma, I hope you're well. Sarah and I are getting remarried next month. I wanted you to hear it from me before you saw it on social media or heard from mutual friends. I also wanted to thank you for having the courage to leave. It forced me to face some truths I'd been avoiding. You were right about everything. I hope you found the happiness you deserve. I read the email twice, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, vindication, regret. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a mild curiosity about how long it had taken them to stop pretending they weren't still married to each other. I showed the email to Klaus that evening. How do you feel about this? He asked. Relieved, I said. It confirms that I made the right choice. They were never going to prioritize our marriage because they never really ended their first one. Do you want to respond? I thought about it for a moment. Actually, yes. I think I do. I wrote back. David, congratulations to you and Sarah. I'm genuinely happy that you've both found your way back to where you belong. Thank you for the apology. It means more than you know. I have found happiness, more than I ever thought possible. I wish you both the best. And I meant it. I was genuinely happy for them. In the same way you might be happy for friends who finally stop fighting their obvious compatibility. David and Sarah belong together. They always had. My marriage to David had been an interruption, not a destination. Chapter 24. The wedding. Klaus proposed to me on a snowy December evening in Prague's Old Town Square. It wasn't a surprise. We'd been talking about marriage for months, planning our future together with the kind of practical romanticism that comes from both having been married before. I want you to know, he said, as he got down on one knee in front of the Christmas market, that you will always be my first priority. Not my only priority, but my first one. Always. Always my first priority. The words I'd needed to hear from David but never had. Yes, I said, not because I was swept away by romance, but because I knew with absolute certainty that Klaus meant what he said. We planned a small wedding in Prague, just our immediate families, our closest friends, and a celebration that belonged entirely to us. Klaus's ex-wife sent a polite congratulations card and a gift for our home. She didn't attend the wedding, didn't offer to help plan it, didn't insert herself into our relationship in any way. She was what an ex-wife should be, a respectful presence in the background, important to their shared child, but irrelevant to our marriage. My parents flew in from Seattle and my sister served as my maid of honor. During her speech at our small reception, Amy said something that made me cry happy tears. To Emma, who finally learned the difference between being included in someone's life and being chosen for it. And to Klaus, who does the choosing so well, being chosen for it. That was exactly right. Epilogue. 3 years later. I'm writing this on a sunny afternoon in our apartment in Prague, looking out at the Vltava River while Klaus makes lunch in the kitchen and our 6-month-old daughter naps in her crib. Clara has Klaus's blue eyes and my stubborn chin, and she is absolutely perfect. Klaus's daughter Greta, now 16, is visiting for the summer. She and Clara adore each other, and watching Klaus navigate his role as both a devoted father to Greta and a devoted husband to me has been a masterclass in how blended families can actually work. When there are conflicts between what Greta needs and what our family needs, Klaus finds solutions that honor both. When his ex-wife has opinions about our parenting choices, Klaus listens politely and then makes decisions based on what he and I think is best for our household. Most importantly, Greta has never once made me feel like an intruder in my own family, because Klaus made it clear from the beginning that while Greta would always be his daughter, I would always be his wife, and those roles didn't compete with each other. This morning, I got a Facebook friend request from Sarah. Her profile picture shows her and David at what looks like Jake's graduation from middle school, both of them beaming with parental pride. They look happy in the way that people look happy when they stop fighting what they actually want. I accepted the friend request and sent her a private message. Congratulations on finding your way back to each other. I hope you're as happy as you look. Her response came quickly. Thank you. We are. And thank you for having the courage to walk away. It forced us both to stop settling for half of what we wanted. I hope you found everything you were looking for. I did, I wrote back. I found everything and more. And it's true. I found a husband who chooses me every day, a stepdaughter who respects our family, a daughter who will grow up knowing what healthy relationships look like, and most importantly, I found myself again. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't fighting for something. It's having the courage to walk away from something that isn't working, even when you love the people involved. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pack a bag, book a flight, and leave behind a life that looks perfect on paper but leaves you feeling invisible. I booked that flight to Prague to save my sanity. I ended up saving my entire life. David wanted to see his ex every weekend, so I booked a flight and left him behind. It was the best decision I ever made. The end author's note. This story explores the complex dynamics of blended families and the importance of establishing clear priorities in marriage. While every situation is unique, the core message remains constant. Healthy relationships require both partners to choose each other as their primary relationship, while still honoring their responsibilities to children from previous relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is recognize when a relationship isn't serving anyone involved and have the courage to make a change.